To move us forward this morning, it's my pleasure to introduce Trooper Sanders. Trooper is CEO of Benefits Data Trust, a nonprofit that uses data, technology, policy change, and direct service to help people tap the more than $80 billion in unclaimed benefits that support critical needs ranging from food security, healthcare, and broadband access. He brings over 20 years of experience working at the crossroads of business, government, and the nonprofit sector. Previously, he was a Rockefeller Foundation Fellow and worked on the social and economic implications of the global rise of artificial intelligence, and so much more than that, which we are excited to hear about in just a moment. With that, please join me this morning in welcoming our keynote address this morning, Trooper Sanders.
I do not have slides because I don't trust myself with all of that. Well, thank you. It's really wonderful to have been invited and to be here. This is I am from Michigan. I'm a Midwestern boy. This is my kind of weather out there. But this is my first time to being in St. Louis, and I have to say, this campus, wow, it's a showstopper. So, I'm here really. I suppose in many ways I'm the living embodiment of an interdisciplinary approach to data. I am proud to help lead an organization, Benefits Data Trust, where data is literally in our middle name. And when I was, walking the halls of academia at the University of Michigan and other places, you could not have paid me enough to go into any more quantitative classes than was absolutely necessary. I studied mostly global political economy, very much on the social science side and qualitative side. And so, when I first began engaging in issues around artificial intelligence, around technology, I have to admit, I can remember going to, there was the first event I went to was one of the big machine learning academic conferences. I mean, where like the hardcore researchers and academics present their research, and there was a social impact summit before that. And, I must admit, for the first couple of days, I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about at all. But then gradually by about day 3, it's like, all right, I'm picking up on some patterns. And then by day 4, I said, wait a minute, they don't know any more what they're talking about than I do. And so then I was ready to jump in and have the conversation and engage in these issues, and frankly, see the value of someone who comes from outside of the quantitative sciences that can bring this issue. So first, let me talk a bit about my organization, Benefits Data Trust, an organization that it's an honor to help lead, and I am particularly just giddy with pride about the extraordinary colleagues who I have the opportunity to work with, and who are right now talking to people all across the country who woke up this morning without a way, hoping maybe if they make that phone call from a letter or a text they receive from Benefits Data Trust saying, hey, there may be some help for you to buy groceries or receive health care or go to school. And for anyone who has experienced that in their lives, or who have seen family members and friends deal with that, it's not an academic matter. It can hit your soul, it can hit your life. And you really wonder, like, how am I going to make ends meet? And often, frankly, there are a lot of closed doors. There's a lot of disappointment. And so, I always say to my colleagues who are benefits outreach specialists who talk to people every day, and they get trained in all sorts of things and how our software works and the rules and regulations and all that. And I always say, don't forget the magic of your voice. And I'll get into sort of how we use data in a second. But the thing that has always stuck with me about our work with individuals is, we use Slack as sort of how our organization communicates. And clients who call us, every now and then they'll want to leave some feedback. And sometimes it's constructive feedback about how we can pull our socks up and do better. but often it's quite positive feedback around the interaction they've had with our benefits outreach specialists. And I'll never forget there was one, and I sort of dip into the channel, and it's really uplifting. And one client, I don't even think she wound up being eligible for benefits. But I'll never forget that she said, "Wow, your colleague spoke to me like she actually wanted to talk to me." And that struck me because, unfortunately, in today's society, for so many people, to be treated with common respect and courtesy and just like a fellow human being, it's actually a sign of privilege. And we have whole swaths of our society where that's not the norm, that's not the default, that's the exception. And frankly, we've built entire systems, sometimes on purpose, other times because, complicated systems just kind of grow weeds, where the human being is lost, the common courtesy is lost, the common respect, the common ease. And that has compound interest, because we also talk to people who call us. I say, "You know what? I got your text or your letter months and months and months ago, and I've been in bad shape. I know I need a checkup. I'm hungry. My kids are hungry. But you know what? I just can't deal with the system that unfortunately goes around our public assistance and public benefits programs. I can't face one more piece of red tape, one more hassle, one more no, one more indignity. So you know what? Being hungry is the better alternative." So as was mentioned, all of these issues ladder up to an $80 billion challenge. And we've spent the past couple of generations, in particular since the Great Depression, doing the hard political work to create different social insurance and social assistance programs to have fewer people who are hungry, more access to healthcare, folks to be able to go to amazing schools like Wash U. And that's great. Now we can have a whole debate around how adequate it is or not, and that's a part of the political process. But even putting that aside, every year we do the politics of putting that money on the table. And yet we make it too difficult for people to tap it in the normal way that most of us would want to. And so Benefits Data Trust was founded in 2005 to really be a practical agent of change. And our founder and board chair, Warren Cantor, has done extraordinary well in his life. Born in tougher economic circumstances in Philadelphia, put himself through school, did very well in business, and was involved in a number of national aging advocacy efforts. And then he reached that point in life, and there are probably some folks here who are part of the so-called sandwich generation, where you're trying to raise kids and you're having to take care of aging parents. And he found himself at that crossroads of life. And he had an extraordinary amount of difficulty helping his mother apply for Medicare, Medicaid, the other benefits that come with aging. And it's sort of interesting because he's like, "Wait a minute, I've done big corporate money things. I know how to make the world work. I'm the type of person who bends the world to my needs, not the other way." He doesn't say that. That's just how if you met him, he's a totally humble human being. He would never ever say that, but and he couldn't get through these applications, pulling his hair out. And he's like, "Wait a minute, if I'm dealing with this, what do you do if you don't have my means? How do you do it?" And so he started Benefits Data Trust with a simple premise. Let's see if we can help as many people as possible. Fast forward a little bit, the state of Pennsylvania has a prescription drug assistance program that is funded through the revenue from the lottery system. So it has its own kind of dedicated funding pot. And they were having a heck of a time getting enough seniors into the program, and connected with Warren. And he said, "Well, Okay, what would you do if these were rich people? Rich people don't have a hard time getting stuff that they, want, need, or entitled to, et cetera, et cetera. I said, all right, if we were trying to sell a rich person on a credit card, this was back in 2005, we'd figure out how do we design the letter and the language and the logo and all the things that go into it in a way that's appealing. Then we hope they call, have some friendly, polite, well-trained people on the other end to make it as pleasant of an experience to do business with them. Why don't we do business with people who are facing challenges and who are poor and who are traditionally marginalized in the way that we do business with wealthy people? And so that's how BDT got started. Just get some good people, be polite, be courteous, build a system, help people. And since that time, we've done, help put more than $10 billion into people's pockets. So where does data come in? Well, the first logical problem that we face is how do you find the people who are likely eligible for benefits, who we can help? Now, one method is to, put a billboard on the side of a bus and do, go on radio and all of that. The challenge with that is you'll often get a lot of people who are not eligible. And frankly, that can flood your system and it can frustrate them because it's like, we don't want to be another wrong door, another no, that increases the stigma, increases the disconnection. And so we found that data and data sharing was part of the secret sauce. And practically, here's what this looks like. So let's take SNAP, or what used to be called food stamps. What we'll typically do in a state where we work is help the agencies develop data sharing agreements with each other, which is often quite complicated, much more easier said than done. And then we'll have a conversation with the state that says, hey, let's look at your Medicaid list. Then take your SNAP list and do a data match. And give us the folks who are receiving Medicaid but not receiving SNAP on the bet that if you're already on Medicaid, chances are you are highly likely eligible for SNAP. And then that begins our outreach process. And from there, we screen people, help them apply. We constantly learn things, and I'll get into some of that later. So it's kind of in some ways, pretty technocratic, but here's where the magic really happens. So I said we started with the seniors prescription drug assistance program. So let's just take seniors. We've done some academic research that showed if you help seniors get SNAP, if they happen to go into the hospital, they'll have a shorter admission because likely they're just in a more robust shape. By the way, seniors with better nutrition who are in better shape can save the state healthcare system about $2,300 a year. And it can, in a material way, delay when seniors might otherwise go into a nursing home or go into a care home. So that whole aging with dignity can be prolonged by making sure a senior can afford a better bag of groceries. So I started this job in fall of 2019. Just unpacked my bags, was sort of figuring things out, and then the world turned upside down with the pandemic. And as you may know, and hopefully you didn't experience this in your family, but one of the epicenters of fatalities to COVID were in nursing homes and care homes in the United States and globally. So if you just connect the two, it just is extraordinary to think that a benefits data trust working with others had solved the senior citizen SNAP access gap using data matching and other techniques in 2017, 2018, enough for seniors to accrue the health benefits of being able to afford a better bag of groceries, that we could have had a material difference in the number of seniors who died from COVID, a material difference in the stress and worry that those who were in care homes face being disconnected from their families because you couldn't let anyone into the nursing home. So this is connecting data and a better bag of groceries to some of the systemic issues that we're facing. Now, we serve people of all ages, and higher education and college students is one of our areas. And we believe there are about 2 million college students across the country who are eligible for SNAP and who are not receiving them. And so we are doing work with campuses all across the country on how they can use data matching to identify the students on their campus or incoming students and help them who might be eligible for SNAP and helping them apply. Now, I'm sure there are a number of folks in this room who could probably answer why is that important besides the moral issue of we shouldn't have hungry people? Why is that important to the business of higher education? How do you finish a degree when you're hungry? How do you get through organic chemistry or the other, weed out classes? For me, it was intermediate microeconomics, where I was like, all right, you need to go write some stuff. How do you do that on a light head when you don't have the nutrition that you need, or when you have to scrounge and move and find more hours to work so that you can afford basic nutrition? So the $3 billion that's on the table for college students to have more nutrition, that's not only an investment in reducing hunger, that's an investment in making sure that campuses like WashU maximize their mission. If you talk to business folks, the governor, others, everyone is terrified about the future of the workforce. How are we going to survive in the 21st century when technology and other things are keeping pace, where there's global competition? Well, all these things that you're hearing about, it's not really talking about what you may think of as the more traditionally well-off who know the path from elementary to high school to WashU to pick your law firm or other firm, and it's sort of on the path. Who we're talking about, who everyone is worried about not converting into the high-performing learners and earners of the future, are likely people who are from families or themselves eligible for benefits or adjacent to it. So solving this issue and using data matching is not only the moral thing to do, it is one of the most strategically important things to do for the United States. And now let me connect the two between the seniors and the college students. So for many families, and particularly families who may be struggling, who's often the stabilizer in the family? It's grandma and grandpa, Mima and Papa. They can help with the childcare, make sure that the girl gets to the Girl Scout troop meeting, all the other things that happen, check on homework, et cetera, et cetera. And we know in the United States that one of the best investments we can make in ending intergenerational poverty in the United States is investing in a middle school girl. Because if she is taking Algebra 1 by the time she leaves middle school, she is on that academic path to STEM careers and STEM adjacent careers, to being able to gain admissions to WashU and move on that career path that can break the cycle of poverty in her family and in her life. And it's often the grandparent who's a linchpin in making that happen. So solving the SNAP benefits gap using data matching for seniors and college students and beyond scales in terms of impact. Now, we are doing more and want to do more with data than just data sharing. And we, are tapping some of the tools of machine learning and artificial intelligence. We actually, we have a chatbot that uses natural language processing to help high school students and their families navigate the federal financial aid process. And we're building from there. But we are in a phase of learning. Now, here's a dirty little secret. Everyone's trying to figure this out. I don't care how many degrees, I don't care how much is in their valuation, although these days the valuations are going up and down for private sector companies. Everyone is trying to figure out data and AI and what does it mean in their organizations, et cetera. So I would just suggest sort of thinking about three things. One, for organizations who are involved in social change, don't skip the basics. BDT has really been fortunate to have supporters such as the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth and others who over the past few years have worked with us to help us scale our ability to tap the potential of data and get on that path to tapping machine learning and AI. But a lot of the work initially was starting with just getting our data house in order, because all those lists that we get from states comes in all sorts of different shapes and formats, and it certainly isn't often the cleanest data set. And it was a big manual process to get it in a format where we can actually start to help people. And so one of the things we've invested in is just how to automate that ingestion process. And it's probably one of the things I'm most giddy about because it seems so technical and nerdy. But our ability to ingest that data automatically without it being a manual process frees up 4 people on my team that can go do all the other, fancier analytical things and high class things that we want to do with data to improve our impact. And it also means that we can just help more people. So focus on that. Second is, there is a robust conversation that needs to be had about the good and ill of artificial intelligence and machine learning and other advanced technologies and techniques. And there are some very real conversations to be had. But I would just say, don't lose the enthusiasm about this. All of this does not have to be a downer. There can be, kind of a twinkle of well, it could do, but it could do as long as if X and Y were true, then we could have all of the impact that AI promises. And that's where having an interdisciplinary group of colleagues and a community is so important. Because, we all bring different things to the table. So, my data architects and data engineers and data scientists approach the world in a particular way. But we need our social workers and our lawyers, and I don't know what I am, the mutts like me, to be looking at the problem and stress testing in different ways. And so, it's really important, this type of community. And I understand that actually the majority of people here are not data scientists. Is that right? It's sort of 50-50, but balanced. That's a big deal. Because, in many conversations, it's often lopsided the other way. And so if you are the sociologist or the anthropologist or the policy person, you are coming into a conversation that is very much quantitative and technical. And I think those are important and they're fascinating, and like I said, I sort of jumped in the middle of that and then kind of figured wait a minute, I can hang here. But we also need to reset the table and make sure that these conversations bring a balanced perspective. And I would say to, our friends on the technical side is to push out of your comfort zone a bit and go be the only data scientist in a conference full of social workers or sociologists. And part of that is, you have an important perspective to bring, but also just that kind of experience of ooh, okay, my normal techniques of conversation and discussion, it's not quite fitting, and I have to figure out how do I meld in here, because only by us, I think this is sort of an issue for kind of diversity in general in society. We all have to know how to be both comfortable and in command and uncomfortable and second chair, and knowing how to blend all of that. The third part is, for all the good we're doing, to be honest, Benefits Data Trust, other organizations, I don't care how much good we're doing in the world, we are not entitled to anyone's trust. So the client who calls me, or the community that is likely benefit eligible, likely from traditionally excluded and marginalized communities, should approach BDT and anything they get from us with the same amount of skepticism that if they got it from name your private sector entity that might not have the consumer at the heart of what they do. And I think sometimes in the social sector, in our enthusiasm and our passion and the urgency of doing good, we can frankly take some ethical shortcuts, not from the point of view of doing ethical harm, but not holding ourselves to the same level of scrutiny and rigor that other sectors need to. And so that means a lot of the questions around bias, et cetera, that are part of the AI community, of making sure that is part of the active conversation internally, and asking the question, what harm, for all the good that we're doing, what harm could we also do? And knowing that just because we're the social sector does not mean that we're immune from doing harm. And the fourth point is just around the business of data. And, as you know, data talent is expensive. A lot of options out there. Tapping data is expensive and hard. And when you start getting into some of the more advanced techniques, like large language models, et cetera, the truth is only a small number of entities, mostly in the private sector, have the horsepower to make the most of that. And so the social sector really has to think carefully about data and AI and the supply chain of making things happen. That's everything from personnel to data sets to analytical techniques, et cetera. And often what that's going to mean is you're going to have to make choices around your budget. You're going to have to make choices around what you can do and what you can't do. Part of that comes from just asking the question, do we need all the fancy stuff? Or can some, maybe basic statistics and linear algebra, other things, cheaper, do the trick? And frankly, being careful not to buy, while being enthusiastic, not buying into the hype and feeling, I always say in my organization, we're not out here trying to cosplay Silicon Valley. I'm not trying to strut around and act like, I'm part of that HBO show. We're here to help people in the most effective way possible. And so that means making some smart choices. But that also means thinking about, how do you work with institutions like WashU? How do you work with the MasterCard centers of the world to really build out the capabilities that's robust and resilient enough? And then, finally, I think it's really important for entities like this to really take a look at the broader world of AI. And I'm really excited about moving from natural language processing to these extraordinary capabilities that large language models offer, where it's really able to using these massive data sets of written materials, where it's able to translate and predict and generate human speech, human voice, without training it on, say, what we had to do with our Wyatt chatbot on the specifics of federal financial aid. I mean, there's enormous power behind that. And in almost any sector, we can think about ways that can be applied. But if you're one of the large companies that's working on this technique, and you're relying on the written word that's widely available. So, the books that may be online, all of the fodder of material that's generated by all of us every day online. Many folks in this room would know the questions you have to ask. If you're just taking the books, you have to think about, all right, who was included and who was excluded in publishing? Which voices dominate and which voices don't? If we really want to train these models to be responsive, we need to think about which traditions are more oral than written. If we really want to make sure that we're addressing equity and social justice matters, and we're talking about the written word or verbal that happens to be captured, many folks come from different communities where more is said in the silence than in the spoken. I think about healthcare, some of the work around healthcare and African-American men, and there are some studies that say that in the exam room, that less is spoken between the patient and the provider, depending on their background and the trust, et cetera, et cetera. So if we are training using these systems, and you're, say, deploying a large language model to advance public health in the community, and it has it'd be wonderful to have an agent that can talk to people to figure out what's going on, et cetera, to make the healthcare provider's time more efficient. But if it's not trained to understand that all sorts of things could be going wrong with me in the exam room, but I'm not going to tell you. I don't know you. Or I may disagree with a health procedure, but I may express it. I may not verbalize it in many sentences. I may just go, And some of us know, like the aunties and uncles would just want, you're like, dang. But that's important. And we have to, if we're going to do equity and mobilize and maximize data and AI, we have to understand the subtleties, and we have to bring the edge into the mainstream. And by the way, we need to make sure that there are market incentives. So for the VCs and private equity and the regulators and others who shape the market, there have to be incentives to make sure we bend AI to our will. So this $80 billion problem, I really see us as not only helping as many people today be less hungry and have better access to healthcare and education, but you give me any systemic issue facing this country and frankly, by connection, probably the world, and I can show you a good time with this $80 billion. You want to address racial disparities, say in maternal health? There are lots of things to do. There's billions and billions of dollars of Medicaid sitting right on the table. You want to talk about climate change? I mean, one of the issues is as extreme weather events become more regular, it is already exacerbating, but it's only going to get harder. Current health conditions, where you can almost set your watch by weather events that are going to disrupt economies and housing, et cetera. Right now, we could do a data match of the areas, I'm being in Missouri, I'm remembering that was in the awful tornado in Joplin, Missouri, 25 years ago? For some reason that sticks in my mind. But we could do an interesting data match of climate risk almost down to the zip code level and do Medicaid and SNAP and be able to say, well, you know what, there are many things that need to happen with, hopefully stopping climate change. But from the point of view of resilience and justice and the response to climate change, let's make sure that at least everyone in these high risk zones are getting all the help that they're eligible for, so that as life happens, as your factory gets knocked down, as frankly, there are more days where it's just too hot to work and you cannot earn a living, we're at least making sure that there's enough around health and nutrition and other benefits to make it just that bit easier and do that at scale. So we got $80 billion to have a good time with using a bit of data. So I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Hi. I actually have one from our virtual audience.
All right.
Nina was asking, how can a small social service agency start with some of these ideas and data sharing?
Yes. Well, I suppose first of all, around that, I would just approach this in an exceptionally practical way. So if you happen to be the agency charged with nutrition, of thinking about your client base of recipients and what might they also be already getting from the government, like Medicaid, that can help. Or let's say that you do great work with a local school system. Maybe the data sharing starts there, where you're working with the local school system and saying, like, can we figure out your free and reduced lunch list? And maybe let's start the outreach from there. So I think, keeping it really, really practical. I will say it'll be very important to lawyer up or tapping, because they have lots of very legitimate questions around how to make sure that data sharing is done responsibly and within all of the other bounds. I should give a plug. In about 6 to 8 weeks or so, BDT is publishing a data sharing playbook to help government officials navigate all of the issues around data sharing. So if you can find me online, if you just ping me at some point and remind me, I will make sure that you get that. And also we're going to have some webinars around that. But I think across these different things, it's really thinking about just connecting the two. There are other areas that I wish we could do more data sharing. For example, utility companies. There's a whole conversation around, chasing arrears and turning people on and off and all of that. But someone being behind on their utilities is an indicator that something's going on in their life. where maybe benefits can be helpful. Now imagine if the SNAP agency was doing data sharing with the utilities. So it's like, right. Once you're late, it's like, hey, do you need some help? There's something going on? Maybe. Any other questions? Wonderful. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.